they want to know what you're going to do about climate change. That's what we hear about. We've got the Carpark Cinema and their climate convos. So we're not going to talk about much else. So I hope you're cool with that. A big thank you to you all for coming tonight. This is a very marginal seat. The Labor Party, currently being held by yourself, Libby, you held it with a 1.1% margin at the last election. But the history books show that the seat was a pretty safe Liberal seat for the better part of 30 years. Like it was definitely a Liberal seat for a long time. Now, tensions are high in this election, and the big issue for the audience is climate change. And I wanted to kick things off and make everyone feel really comfortable. It's a safe space. We just want to have a really cool chat about what you think about the issue. And I'm just going to quickly throw this one to you. So what is the most recent reading for atmospheric CO2 on the planet in parts per million? Yeah, see, great. They got the joke. It's actually 420.66. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Everybody's chilling. So all jokes aside, I did Google that, by the way. I didn't know it beforehand. So I'll start with you, Libby. In your view, what will be some of the big issues in the coming election when it comes to climate, nationally, but also in this particular electorate?
Thank you, and welcome everyone to Wadawurrung Country, where we meet today. Pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also just like to say this well has finally arrived, so that's great for the Rip Curl Pro. And on this day, I would just like to say that Spring Creek Valley has now been, by the state government, they're not going to develop it for residential. I've actually fought for that. It is such a great outcome. As Mayor of Surf Coast, I actually fought to make sure that valley has been protected. I'm so pleased. The Liberal actual planning minister at the time called me gutless for standing up with my council against it. So I'm absolutely thrilled. We need our green belts between our townships, and well done to everyone here tonight who's actually fought for that. It's really, really amazing. Now on to climate change. We must face the biggest thing that we need is a government that actually cares about climate change and actually doesn't have its head in the sand. We need to make sure that we can reduce our emissions. Now, some people in the audience I know would like me to say that we're going to kick in straight away. But we have a plan. We're 43% emissions reduction by 2030 and zero by 2050. And I know for Alex, she would like to see more than that. And I get that. But we are on the path and we have a fantastic plan to get there. What we don't need is a government that is going to invest in fossil fuels. Labor has said we will not invest in any new coal plant. We will not invest in any gas plant. It is important that we transition away and towards renewables. I have a plan, but I won't take up much time. We can talk about that a little later on.
For sure. Thank you very much for that. I mean, it's interesting, this word transition, though. Like, I've got to pick you up on that because one of the big issues that people care about here is new exploration for oil and gas. Yeah. And it has to be said, like, Australians, I'm sure I can speak for everyone here, but we love winning stuff. We like being first, but currently we're coming last when it comes to oil and gas exploration. There's many countries that have banned it already. They don't see a need to explore for more, and they're doing all right in the transition. So what do you kind of have, like, what can you say to that in terms of, I'll pass this on to Alex Marshall and come back to you, Libby, but what do you say to that there's this inability for us to stop doing the thing that will feed the beast?
First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to emphasise that climate justice and climate action is intersectional and includes the incorporation and negotiations with First Nations peoples. That's imperative. And the question, I forgot it, it was... Oh, okay, yes, I agree. No new fossil fuel projects. It can be done, absolutely, and it has to be done. It's imperative. We must invest in transitioning workers and supporting coal and gas communities from fossil fuels into the renewable energy sector and ensure those workers have well-paid, secure, sustainable jobs. We must not have new fossil fuel projects. That's not debatable.
So it's a popular sentiment around here because we've had moments in our history where, as surfers, where we've paddled out for these things and we've shown up and we've got results. And one of the really interesting things I'll just kind of add to you, because I'd like you to get your voice on this as well, Stephanie, is that the Liberal government in New South Wales, they've put a ban on offshore sea mining very recently, and it's quite a progressive move for a Liberal government, and it's very much appreciated by everyone who was worried about PEP 11 over on the East Coast. And I just wonder, like, for you with this type of, we all know we're on a transition, we all know that the Liberal Party has policy, the Labor Party has policy, but everyone here kind of wants to see more. This is a climate change event. We want to see bolder and deeper action. How, in your opinion, do you think that we can go there and kind of look at, like, how is it working so well for New South Wales? Like, how do we get some of that policy feeding up into the federal space? That'd be really good to know. Thanks.
It's an excellent question, and I'll also acknowledge the traditional owners and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging too, and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the audience tonight. Look, I think you've made a really good point that there is movement and there is a willingness to change, and I'm very much a part of that. I think more needs to be done. One of the most empowering things that I learned about the Liberal Party when I looked into joining was the fact that they do actually embrace individual viewpoints. And there's a lot of cliches around it being a broad church, and probably church isn't the greatest word to use at the moment with that particular description, but they do actually embrace individual viewpoints. And we have seen people crossing the floor, and that is part of the Liberal Party. There are opportunities to be different from, there's no party line as such. Yes, we're supposed to support policy. I absolutely support the values, but I've been very clear that I don't personally support new fossil fuel developments either. I listen to the community. And I think Bridget Archer actually described it beautifully when somebody accused her of not necessarily being heard by the boss, and she said, my boss is my community. And that's exactly the position I take as well. And I think probably the most powerful thing that I can offer to you and to the community is that I will be the voice in Parliament pushing for change and pushing for more action. So it is possible, as you've seen in New South Wales, and every party and every electorate is subject to the power of the voter. So when your voice gets heard, it really does get heard. So thank you for the question.
Thanks. I have to let Libby respond to that a little bit. There's a few elements in there about individual viewpoints and the ability to move the party on certain issues. So what do you say to that when there's this this approach? Like, here's a Liberal candidate who is backing an end to fossil fuel developments in these waters, which is what we're all here to hear. We want to hear this and we want to see it happen. So what do you say to that then with the Labor Party in terms of what it can do to advance this type of policy position moving forward?
Thank you. I think firstly it must be said that I'm sure that Stephanie is very sincere in her views around wanting change. But to me, I chose the Labor Party because it was closest to my principles. And you have to actually own your party's policy. I have stepped up and said, we must have a strong climate action policy. And I wouldn't choose to be part of a party that doesn't have a policy that is going backwards. So, for example, the federal government have now just decided they're going to spend $250 million of taxpayers' money at an event that was announced just in Geelong, just yesterday, and it's about $250 for Viva gas and for petrol. It might be fuel security, but it is also about investment in fossil fuels, and about the Otway Basin. We're seeing fast exploration. Now, as a member of a caucus, I have stepped up on PEP 11, said in the Parliament that I will not support drilling near the 12 apostles. That is absolutely sacrosanct. That is a beautiful part of our world. And it is currently still a part of Corangamite moving down that way along the Ocean Road. So my view is you have to stand up for what you believe in and have a party that backs you in. And whether it is on no new money for fossil fuels, that's really important. But we also have to talk about exploration. And I know you've just showed a film on the Otway Basin, and Labor has said that we will look at this if we get into Parliament. We need to make sure that we do transition, and it has to be swift. We need a plan to get there. That plan has to invest in renewables, significant encouragement for people, for industry to invest. We need to reduce the cost of an electric car. We all drive around, most of us, in fuel guzzlers. We're going to take the tariff off. We want to create componentry in this region, because manufacturing, we need to make things here, and it has to be renewables. We have a really fantastic opportunity in this country, and I would love to see that Stephanie and the Liberal Party actually have that belief, and I know that the Greens do, and you want us to do more. So there's opportunity for bipartisanship, but we all have to admit that climate change is here. We have a climate emergency, and we cannot wait any longer.
Thanks for that. Look, about bipartisanship, though, I have to kind of push back a little bit and just say, like, are you you're the sitting member? You know that this Otway gas issue is a significant one. The 12 apostles are within sight, right? Yep. They're not somewhere over the horizon. So that's the thing about this issue, is that a lot of these permits are happening over the horizon. Like we don't get to see them, so that it's harder for people to connect with them, and it's easier for politicians to push them further over the horizon. So in terms of what your kind of commitment might be, if you are successful again and you improve that margin at the coming election, if that's your good fortune, is this issue something, this acreage release, this event that takes place every year when politicians and the authority looks at what are we going to release and who's going to bid for it, like, is this something that you think the Labor Party has in it to change? Is this something that you can champion?
I have proven that I'm championing this. I've stood up, as I said, in Parliament. I've stood up down here on the coastline and talked about this. I will continue to do so. And if elected, that is something we must make a decision on. I cannot say tonight what our policy is, but I can assure you I will be a great advocate to make sure that we don't continue exploratory drilling for gas. Gas is actually, there's less gas now in Bass Strait. We have to actually convert, and instead of actually exploring for gas, what we should be doing is looking at ways to use what we already have. Most of it is sold off overseas. We still have people using their gas hot plates, heating their houses with gas. So we do need to realise that we're not there yet. But how quickly we get there, it depends on a government that has policies that will do that. So I'm up for that task, and so is my party.
It also depends on people holding politicians to account. So it sounds like we've got bipartisanship on this issue. It's very close to me. I don't know. What does everyone think in the audience? Are we getting pretty close? Do we feel confident that the candidates are going to be able to deliver on this issue? Please make some noise. It's really quiet here at the moment. Thank you. They're a little undecided. All right, we've got some other questions here. I'll get back on the script. So, Stephanie, what is the one policy related to climate that your party is bringing to this election that you yourself, with your individual perspective on things as a Liberal, what is the one thing that you're most proud of that you're seeing coming into this election?
Again, great question. We're only one of a handful of countries that actually has a plan. This government has a very clear plan, the Long-Term Emissions Reduction Plan, which if you Google that and read the 122 pages of information, it's a really, really strong, detailed plan talking about how the investment, the incentives, the facilitation, the encouragement of partnerships, the role that government should play in actually getting towards net zero 2050 and getting to there. We basically, I won't get caught up in interim targets because that's probably something else that will dive us off into a different conversation. But my background is in sustainability reporting, so I'm absolutely about targets, and I'm actually about ambitious targets, which I've had a conversation recently. The party prefers to have realistic targets that we can actually meet. I do understand that because it is very much an accountability conversation, and the target of net zero by 2050 is something that the Liberal government is incredibly strongly committed to, and to reach that agreement was something that obviously has taken quite a long time. There was a long debate about it. I think there's a bit of a conversation about how do you bring the Nationals across and are we ever going to get there? What people need to understand too is we're pretty lucky down here in Victoria in that we don't have a big mining community, but there's a lot of people who actually do depend on mining and fossil fuel development for their very income and their livelihood. And if you're an MP in an area like that, then your pressures are very different, and we do have to respond to our community. So to actually arrive at the net zero 2050 target is an incredible achievement for the Liberal government, and the plan behind it is clearly why it took so long, because it is actually about making commitments to things that we can achieve. So I'm actually really proud of that plan. When I heard the media take on it and people talking about the summary document, which is essentially a slide deck, so it doesn't really lend itself to detailed analysis because it's something that you would talk to. If you read the McKinsey report, which is the 122-page document, it is incredibly detailed. There's huge investments going in. This government's already put in about $6 billion worth of investment into environmental programs since it was elected. So very much committed to change, committed to getting the right thing done in the right way. So I'm actually really proud of that plan.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. I'll pass on to Alex. You've been sitting there very patiently. Sorry about that. I mean, realistic targets? What does ambitious targets sound like for the Greens? Like, is that, I mean, I'm sure that yours are going to succeed those. So what's the one policy that you're most excited about? And I'll try and keep everyone to one policy so we can be very clear with the audience about what you yourself as a candidate feels.
Thank you. What's so frustrating about discussions on climate is that it's such an unambiguous issue. The science is out there, the facts are out there. The IPCC report says we're not doing enough, and if we don't drastically transition to a post-carbon economy, we will reach 1.5 degrees warming sooner than we think. And the reason climate is so divisive is because Liberal and Labor take millions of dollars in donations from the fossil fuel industries. In return, they get special treatment. Many of these companies pay no tax, and they send their profits offshore tax-free. Makes me mad. So the favourite policy of the Greens is that we do not take donations from the fossil fuel industry. This thing, yeah, it's great. The only reason climate is divisive and we struggle to achieve bipartisanship is because these political parties are taking money from the very companies, the very industry that is invested in destroying our planet. The exciting thing is we do have all of the resources, the abilities, we know what to do, we can do it. We're just lacking the political will to do so because of fossil fuel donations. And that's the policy I'm proudest of.
I know everyone's cheering, but for me that kind of went without saying. Like, you know, I would be very surprised if the Greens were taking money from fossil fuel companies. So I'm going to give you another shot at it now because, you know, that goes without saying to most of us. I know it was quite a well-received sentiment in the audience there, but, you know, what are some policies that you like? What's your favourite apart from that one that I kind of think everyone already understood? So I'll give you another shot.
Another policy I'm very proud of is our emissions reduction target, which is 75% by 2030 and net zero or net negative by 2035 or sooner. We have to do that. We can do it. The Greens have an achievable science-backed plan that we can achieve those emission reduction targets that are so necessary.
And I'll now pass on to Libby for your one. You know, what's your favourite policy, the one that's probably nearest and dearest to your heart within the Labor platform?
Yep. It's called Powering Australia, and this plan involves, touched on it before, about electric vehicles, taking the tariff off so we can all afford to drive one. Then we need this system to be able to plug our electric vehicles in. That's really important. We need to make some of that componentry here in Australia, and we actually have a plan to do that. And actually not just making things like componentry here, but a whole raft of things, which is about jobs and employment. But it's also about the grid. We need to rewire our grid. Across Australia now, there are people who have solar on their roof, but they can't pump it back into the grid. The grid is not capable. So what Labor says, if we're going to actually encourage people to pump their renewable energy into the grid and reduce your energy prices at the same time, we need to rewire that grid. It's so important. It's going to be a huge investment, but it's going to create a massive amount of jobs. And that's the thing about renewables. It's not just about the environment, which is obviously is very, very important if you don't want to see floods and fires and sea level rise and everything else. But it actually means we can reduce energy prices, create jobs. We also want to do community batteries. We've announced one here in Torquay. We're going to do 400 of them across the nation. That means if you don't have solar, if you're a single mum with a couple of kids, you cannot put the solar because you can't afford it on your roof back into the grid. We say to you, you can plug into our grid, our battery, and you can actually reduce your prices and feel as though you're playing a role on reducing emissions. It's so important. We have so many other components of it, but again, it is a plan that you can check out on our website. I'm proud of it. It is the way we're going to get to a realistic target of 43% renewable emissions reduction by 2030.
Thanks for that, Libby. And I should offer a response to that, because to me it sounds like that particular investment into the grid so that it can enable individual households to feed back in the solar that they're creating. I just have to ask Stephanie, as a Liberal candidate in this election, it sounds like that is a personal choice issue, enabling the choice that a household might want to make to earn money off their solar. Is this the type of policy that for you, with your kind of individual view as a Liberal, with the ability to talk about these things in the party room, are these types of investments things that you might be able to support in the spirit of bipartisanship in which we sit here today?
Absolutely, and I think one of the big appeals for me in running as a federal candidate is bringing that federal policy down to the individual level, because I do think the answer is in all our individual actions. It is all those small things that we do that we were talking about earlier. We have chickens, we grow our own vegetables. My husband did the whole nutrition in the garden element as well. We have a little orchard in our normal size house block. I shop at op shops, I walk instead of drive, I do all of those things. So I think if we all do those little 1%ers, that makes the difference, and it's actually drawing those actions, because I see down here in this community, the whole of Corangamite, but particularly the Surf Coast community, is people are really keen to be empowered to make a difference themselves and to be rewarded for the effort that they put in, that we all put in. I think we are all actually pulling on the same rope, and it might surprise you all to hear consensus at a climate forum, but I think that's where we've reached. I think that's where we are as a country now. We've all recognised that this is the way that we need to go, and now it is about how we get there. So the feed-in tariff is terrible, and that's a state situation here. We put solar panels on our roof, and it's rather underwhelming what you get back. I think it's only 6 cents or something now. So I think we do need to all push at all levels of government to be able to make sure that the difference that we can make is really real and does feed into the national picture as well. So I do think it is all about what we can do as individuals, and that then pushes federal policy as well. The more MPs you have in Parliament who are doing these things and making these decisions, the better.
Just to clarify that point, though, individual decisions, 1% decisions, yes, they do add up, but it does take governments to make big investments to enable those decisions. Governments, they invest in roads so we can go places and all that kind of stuff. So I guess what I'm asking is, just back to that question, here's a policy that the Labor government's putting in. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be a big investment. It's a renewal of the grid. But that's going to enable individual choices, which is a Liberal value, right? We love, Liberals like to have individual choices, all these kind of things, and that's okay. Most of us here like to make our own individual choices as well. So is that type of policy, that type of investment that is in the Labor platform, is that the type of thing that you hear, just yourself? I'm not asking you to dictate Liberal policy at this forum, but for you individually, is that something you can look at and go, yeah, I can see how that investment would be something worth pursuing?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and I'm not. I mean, I'm not a member of parliament. That's the tricky part of being a candidate. You know, There's a limit to how much I actually know how it works, and that's probably some of the questions we might get to a little bit later. As an MP, I would probably have to throw to Libby about how you can advocate and what she's effectively done and what she's spent her time doing to actually make a difference. But that's part of the opportunity of being actually inside the halls to work out how you can influence. And I certainly managed to work that out as the mayor. From an outsider, it was a huge disconnect. How do people actually affect planning decisions, you know? How do they change things that are going on around them without just being called NIMBYs? And once I understood, having been the chair of the planning committee for about 4 weeks, it's like, right, okay, this is how it works. We've got a panel, there's 6 people, they're there for about an hour. They don't want to be sort of sitting there listening to the same people bang on about the same thing over and over again. So you have 3 minutes, talk to policy, be persistent, be polite, and actually all take a policy and speak 3 minutes each on those different things. Don't wear out the panel and you'll get it the way you want it. And that worked. And I educated people how to do that. So it's actually understanding how the system works, which minister to go to, how the decisions are made, how policy is shaped. That's the part that really excites me. And then sharing that with people so that you guys know how to advocate. It's all about picking your battles, right? You can't win every single one. So you would pick the battles. And certainly better progress on environmental action and climate change response is one of mine. So, yep.
Stephanie's paying attention to the notes and the questions in which they were put here. So thank you for that one. The next question was about, you know, what are the ways that people can effectively communicate their concerns about climate outside of the vote that they have? You know, like what we're trying to achieve as an organisation, as a non-profit, is to enable surfers to continue on this, you know, we call this like a point break of engagement. So there's many spots for them to jump on this wave together and that we can all go deeper on this wave as we see fit. On that question, like what can this community here do? They're going to vote in a little while, Libby. What can they do after that? Like how do they approach politicians? And what's the most effective way for them to have their case heard and get your ear so that it ends up echoing in the halls of power?
I think people need to stand up and speak out. You can, as a group, you can rally. We've had the climate action marches. There's been Students for Climate Action. They've marched in the streets. I've marched with them. It is really, really powerful. I do think it is really the voice of the people when, if you believe something is not right, you should step up and speak about it. You can write a letter to the editor. You can ring your local MP. You can go up to Canberra and stand on the front lawn with signs and make your voice heard. Things like, for example, when the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government have actually ARENA, which was set up under the last Labor government, it was an agency designed to bring about investment in climate change, renewable energy for industry. It was these government wanted to tear it down, and now it's being used to pay for fossil fuels. It should not be used for fossil fuel industry development. It was there, and I will make sure that if we get back in, that is put towards renewables, because that is the future, and it's up to people to speak out. You know, we are in a climate emergency. Every member of parliament, every mayor, every person should be able to speak out on that and make sure that we act. So it's about raising your voice in every forum, and tonight's one of those occasions. Speak to your friends about it. We need, and your vote matters. Your vote matters on this. Tell us what you believe. You put your vote and you claim it. That's a great part of living in a democracy. We are so fortunate.
We're fortunate. I just feel like I should grouping together the Turnbull, Abbott and Morrison governments in one sentence. They're not, you know, they were all different blokes at the top of those parties and leading this country at different times, and they did have different views on this, and that's kind of what we recognise, that there was this opportunity when Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister, where he was a Prime Minister that got the science and he was willing to work bipartisan with the other parties, right? So, you know, I just wanted to correct that a little bit, or push back on that coupling, that unholy trinity that you just put together there. You know, you say that raising your voice and kind of like rallying and like everybody sitting down and listening really politely and showing a lot of respect to politicians, which is a really beautiful thing. And I think that the audience should give themselves a round of applause for that one. It's a really cool thing that we can sit here and listen to all the candidates, have it out in a really respectful way. But, when we wave these placards, when we do these paddle outs, sure, there is a voice that's heard and it's a pretty loud one. But is it really moving the needle in the parliament? On the majority of issues, there's still a lot of stuff that keeps on happening, right? So what are let's go back to that, and I'll pass this over to you, Stephanie, in terms of that. I know that you're not a person, you haven't been elected to the parliament yet, but you did share an anecdote about your experience as the mayor of Geelong. How do you see, if you're the successful candidate in this election, what do you encourage all the people here listening tonight? How should they approach you? What's the best way to engage with you if you are the successful candidate?
One simple word: emails, lots of them, because we have to deal with it as elected officials. So sending emails is a really good way to do it. But sort of more broadly than that, I think to take the politics out of it and take the conflict out of it. Rallies are good for media, but they're actually quite adversarial in some ways. So I think assuming that your MP is fighting you, or assuming that your government is fighting you, is starting on the wrong foot and starting with the wrong premise. I prefer people to come and talk to me. And I've spent a lot of time talking to Belinda about, what are the issues? How can we actually understand this? What can I do in terms of the ocean acreage releases, and where are we at with that? And, what percentage of waters are now protected? That's 45%. There's 2 new marine parks. There's progress being made. I don't have all the stats and the numbers because I can't read it properly because I'm half blind. But otherwise, you can always follow me up and ask me questions offline too, because I will have more information, but I don't have it all at my fingertips. But I believe it is actually very much about working together, not politicising it. I will just make a little point about Arena was, the Liberal Party wasn't happy with the way that was set up. They've since resolved the issues that they had, and there's actually I think it's 4 times $400 million going into that over the next 5 years, so a 40% increase on what it was in the last 5 years. So there's definitely big investments going into Arena. Also, the Labor Party's Powering Australia policy actually mentions the word Morrison more times than it mentions the word renewables. So I think taking politics out of the conversation is a good start, and actually working together and assuming that we are, again, all pulling on the same rope, we're all on the same page, we're all going towards very similar or same targets, ultimately the same target. How we get there is what's important, because you can have ambitions, but you've got to realise achievements.
I'll also have to pull you up on a couple of things there, Stephanie. Sorry, I'm trying to be really, really balanced here tonight. But, nobody's interested in Morrison here. They're interested in Asher. That's who they're interested in. They're here to vote for you or not. And I think we all know that it's pretty hard to take seriously a Prime Minister who walks into Parliament with a lump of coal, right? It's a really hard act to follow. But I got to say, it's... and I'm just a little bit worried about the email thing, because we send out emails all the time and none of them get opened. So, that's just a joke about being a non-profit sending a bunch of emails that don't get opened. So please open your emails next time we send you one. I think that, get the address right. But it's really cool. And also with Arena, we know that it's been a controversial piece under the Liberal government. We know that, if there's $400 million being invested into it, is that going to include carbon capture and storage? Is that what we're going to be dealing with? Or is it going to go into bona fide renewable energy projects that actually advance us forward? So instead of cleaning up the mess we're creating. So it's really important. And there's a lot of things there with Arena that really do need cleaning up. And I'm sure a lot of people here would love to see that become... I know that there's no policy is perfect and it goes through its iterations, but when you do see things that are creeping over towards gas and carbon capture and storage, it does get a little bit tricky. So Alex, I would like to know from you now that the same kind of question, what do you see as the most effective way for the audience here to engage in the politics outside of the election period? What do you like to see as a member of the Greens?
Well, I've come to the Greens as a climate activist. I am a climate activist. I've worked on many campaigns, and some of them have been effective. And I wish I had an answer for a foolproof, guaranteed way to get climate action done. I wouldn't need to be here today if that wasn't the case. But for the audience members, I think it's important to just do something. Tap into those skills, the things that you enjoy, and apply them to climate action. whether that's in joining a local group, one of these fantastic not-for-profits who've put on this event today, whether it's running a protest, attending a protest, sending emails, signing petitions. If it's local action, national action, global action, it's so important to just get started and do what makes you feel like you're doing something. It's so important to speak out and speak to others, talk about climate, talk about politics, because I get frustrated because people are like, don't make climate a political issue. Don't talk about politics. It's dirty. It's untouchable. Don't talk about it around the dinner table. But politics, it's not separate from our everyday lives. Politics is the reason that we can walk into the doctor and get free healthcare. It's the reason we can't walk into the dentist and get free healthcare. It's the reason my fellow candidates and I, as women, can stand up and run for federal parliament.
Right. We stood up and got the vote through protest. Well said.
Politics isn't dirty, and we should be talking about it. And we should be making our voice heard. A quote from Margaret Mead goes something along the lines of, "Never underestimate the ability of a small group of people to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So be loud, get elected, vote, protest, email, be part of groups, because we can all do this together, and I'm right there with you.
I feel like we're getting to those final statement moments that Alex has now led the way on. And, speaking of a small group of people, there's going to be, just over 150 of them. They're going to sit in a big chamber in Canberra, and that's a small group of people who could make a very big difference. So I will now hand over to you, Stephanie Asher. A final kind of remark for you to share with the audience, something that gives you hope about the ability for the federal government, whichever one comes into power. Like, can we do what needs to be done to get there in time? And are you hopeful about the future and your ability to play a role in that positive future?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to join tonight and also to have a final statement. Be positive. I'm a very positive person. I have a very positive outlook for the future. I know that there is a lot of talk of doom and gloom, but we have the power, and I do believe too, in terms of politics, vote for the person that you think will take your case to the parliament, whether it's state parliament, federal parliament, local government, wherever. Vote for the person that you think will be able to put your case forward for you. So that's my final comment. Thank you.
Round of applause, folks. Now for you, Libby, I'll give you the final word of the night. You're the sitting member. You've had a good run in this place. You're obviously hoping to continue that good run. What gives you hope about what you're about to embark on, and if you are successful in holding on to the seat? It's a marginal seat. It's going to be a tough contest. So what gives you hope, and do you think that the Labor Party can get there?
My hope is based on the fact that the people here tonight and the people in Corangamite, I know, care about climate change so passionately. And I think it is why at the last election we did get across the line. I think that we do need to have hope in the future and in a government that is going to step up to the plate. We need to have people who actually believe in climate change. And each of us as individuals might have our personal views, but it is up to people to commit to a party that they believe is going to do the job. It is about policy. This is not an election where we're all independents. We represent different parties here, and we have different policies on climate change. Have a look at our policies. Work out for yourselves which policy is the strongest and the most likely to get up and be able to make a difference to this planet and for our children's futures. And I think I have hope that people will make that decision and we will have a hopeful future, and it means that we can have a planet, we can actually embrace renewables, it's going to create jobs, and it's going to have benefit for people at the hip pocket. It makes sense. It's an absolute no-brainer. So I do have hope, and it's going to be up to the people. And as I said, we live in a beautiful, fantastic democracy. If you think about places like the Ukraine, we have a place where we can all have a say and make that difference. So more power to everyone here.
On that note, thank you very much. A big round of applause here for the candidates, Alex Marshall, Libby Coker and Stephanie Asher. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.